Steve Martin exposes 9 actors he believes embody true cruelty. In the crowded galaxy of Hollywood comedians, Martin's presence is unmistakable. Famous for his calculated sense of humor, deliberately crafted roles, and almost architectural precision and timing, he stands apart from the freewheeling style of his peers. Steve doesn't just crack jokes, he constructs them, recalled a collaborator who partnered with him on several projects. Each pause, each movement, each word is intentional. He treats comedy like a jeweler setting stones in place. That commitment has kept Martin among the most respected comedic voices from his wild early days to his refined career as an actor, author, and musician. Yet that same precision has often clashed with performers who operate by very different standards. Martin never publicly slams colleagues, noted a longtime confidant. That's not his habit, but he doesn't overlook behavior, and he doesn't forget. When someone derails his process or mistreats others, they vanish from his circle completely. His recall for unprofessional conduct is razor sharp. Tonight we uncover 9 figures who, by many accounts, ended up on the wrong side of Martin's private blacklist. They represent the opposite of his meticulous and respectful creative ethic.
Take your medicine here, take your medicine, you fat. You didn't give us a script, we can't go on. We're doing the week.
1. Chevy Chase, the appetite that consumed the set. Their clash is said to have begun on Three Amigos in 1986. What could have been a comedy dream team quickly showed deep divisions in both craft and conduct. It felt like 2 different worlds trying to connect, admitted a crew member from the film. Martin arrived with every line down cold, ready to collaborate. Chase, however, often came in with ideas that contradicted the script entirely. Sources claim his conduct went beyond creativity into behavior Martin found troubling. Chase is said to have rewritten dialogue to grab better punchlines and dismissed crew members in ways that jarred Martin's sense of respect. Steve views film as teamwork, where every player matters, said a producer close to him. Chase, by contrast, acted as though the spotlight existed for him alone. Their conflict reportedly hit its peak during a grueling day on set. After Chase pushed for yet more script changes, boosting his role, Martin was overheard telling John Landis, "If ego were currency, Chevy could buy Manhattan." What truly upset Martin, according to insiders, wasn't just Chase's arrogance, but its ripple effect on others. Steve always said the best comics lift the whole scene, remembered a director who worked with him later. He believed Chase did the reverse, undercutting others just to shine brighter. Though they stayed cordial during the press tour, those in the industry noticed Martin never paired with Chase again, a trend that repeated with others who failed his standards. What made Steve's stance against Chevy unusual is that he almost never criticizes peers, stressed the producer. But with Chase, he broke that rule. A colleague once heard him say Chevy was a brilliant comic mind without humanity behind it. From someone as careful as Martin, that was condemnation of the highest order. This episode confirmed for Martin a truth he'd suspected all along. Raw talent without decency poisons the craft. However skilled the comedian, the atmosphere turns sour. You guys are just too... Jim Carrey, the storm in human form. His uneasy connection with Martin highlights 2 utterly opposite styles of comedy. Martin's tight, exacting wit couldn't be more different from Carrey's chaotic energy, a conflict that boiled over during an awards show in the mid-1990s. Witnesses say Carrey's speech dragged far over time and veered toward chaos. Martin, next to present, tried restoring order by walking out with a handmade "wrap it up" sign. What he intended as harmless humor allegedly struck a nerve. Jim didn't see it as playful, recalled an attendee. What Martin framed as a timing joke, Carrey seemed to take as an insult. The shift in the audience was instant. Though both later maintained polite relations, Martin reportedly found Carrey's wild unpredictability draining. A colleague who worked with them said Martin once described it as doing algebra inside a tornado. He never dismissed Jim's ability, that much was clear. Yet their styles were so different that working together proved nearly unworkable. Insiders say the real issue for Martin wasn't Jim's manic spark, but how it altered the energy of everyone else in the room. Martin treats comedy like a shared dialogue that requires listening as much as speaking, said a director who collaborated with him. By contrast, Carrey's method resembled a one-man performance that filled the scene completely, leaving no room for others. This clash in vision reportedly made Martin avoid pairing with Carrey no matter how many chances came his way. Industry reports suggest Martin walked away from multiple offers to team up, convinced their styles could never align. In private, he even called Carrey an attention vampire, claimed a producer who knew them both. He believed Jim would dominate each moment with no concern for rhythm or the presence of others. This wasn't rooted in animosity. It was his conviction that their comedic methods could not coexist. What makes the standoff remarkable is that it wasn't fueled by dislike, but by a stark difference in how they defined comedy. That gap ensured the two never truly shared the stage. We counted ourselves lucky, though, because we actually got to see her with our own eyes. She was treated like royalty. Did you ever watch her? Oh, kids. She's the palest woman you'll ever lay eyes on. Number 3. Bette Midler, the scene stealer. Reports say the friction between Steve Martin and Bette Midler traces back to a charity gala in the early 90s. Those who were there recalled that what began as a shared evening of entertainment shifted dramatically once Midler seized control of the program. Martin had prepared the show with precision, working alongside writers to keep comedy balanced with the event's fundraising purpose, recalled one of the organizers. But Bette went her own way. Without warning, she broke into an unscripted musical routine that completely altered the event's mood and timing. Witnesses claim Martin looked startled by the move, frustrated not by the singing itself, but by the disregard for the structure they'd built. Martin has always valued teamwork and respect, explained a longtime colleague. What he felt that night, however, was one performer putting self-expression above the collective mission, raising funds for a cause. Matters reportedly worsened when Martin left before the gala ended, leaving a generous donation with a note that one witness claimed read, "Tell Bette it's from her biggest fan, Silence." Although both were polite in later public settings, insiders noticed Martin never partnered with Midler again, keeping consistent with his habit of quietly stepping away from clashing collaborators. What troubled Steve most, said a producer who worked with them both, wasn't Bette's undeniable talent. It was, as he described it, narcissism disguised as giving, using a charity platform more for self-promotion than the intended purpose. This story reflects Martin's larger belief about performance. Above all, he insists that collaboration means respecting agreements and keeping the bigger picture in mind, for the performers, the cause, and the audience. Great performers make the people around them shine, a director once quoted Martin as saying. From his perspective, what Bette did was the reverse. She didn't share the spotlight, she absorbed the whole evening for herself. Though no public feud ever followed, those who understood Martin's careful professional distance saw this as the silent end to any chance of the two working together again.
What is that? I don't know what the hell that is.
Number 4. Bill Murray, the wild card. Accounts of Martin's tension with Murray showcased the conflict between order and chaos that often defined his collaborations. Reports say it all began during a live TV event in the 1980s, when Murray disrupted a segment Martin had planned down to the last detail. Martin had organized everything with care, as always, remembered one TV producer who was there. But Murray arrived late, ignored the rehearsal, and proceeded to derail the structure once they went live. According to witnesses, Murray mocked Martin mid-bit and deliberately broke the timing of jokes, an approach that clashed directly with Martin's careful style. Respecting the craft and the audience matters most to him, explained a writer who has worked by his side. To Martin, Murray's actions weren't inspired improvisation. They were careless disruptions of work others had invested in. The fallout was serious. People close to them say Martin avoided Murray entirely for almost 10 years. For a man known for his unfailing professionalism, that was an unusually severe response. What irritated Steve wasn't Bill's attempts at humor, said a director familiar with them both. The problem was that Murray acted as though his spur-of-the-moment instincts outweighed the effort others had invested in shaping the sketch. That kind of disregard for teamwork was something Steve would never accept.
This clash of values didn't just involve one encounter, but reflected completely different ways of making comedy. Martin's methodical precision stood in opposition to Murray's freewheeling style, which thrived on surprise and chaos. Steve once called Murray both gifted and destructive, shared a longtime collaborator. He believed Bill approached comedy like combat, willing to sabotage others if it got him a laugh. For Martin, whose comedy depends on trust and structure, that behavior crossed a line. What makes their conflict especially striking is that both are celebrated legends, though their philosophies could not be further apart. Their failure to connect remains one of comedy's big unanswered questions, a partnership between giants that never happened because of clashing visions. 5. Robin Williams, the whirlwind of improvisation. The reported rift between Steve Martin and Robin Williams was less about dislike and more about irreconcilable comic methods. It was Martin's clockwork timing against Williams' explosive spontaneity. Witnesses say this divide surfaced most clearly during a 1990s TV appearance where both shared the stage. What should have been a highlight instead turned into a study in mismatched energy. Steve came fully prepared, remembered a producer, with every line set up and timed. Robin arrived carrying only his trademark stream-of-consciousness brilliance. The performance soon unraveled into what one observer called comedy chaos, as Williams interrupted Martin's lines with rapid improvisations that dismantled the show's design. Steve tried to hold the framework intact, while Robin playfully tore it down around him, recalled a writer who was there. There was no malice in Robin's interruptions. It was simply how his creativity flowed. But for Steve, whose comedy relies on precision, the unpredictability was agonizing. Later, Martin compared the clash to reciting poetry on a roller coaster, a vivid metaphor for his struggle against Robin's uncontainable energy. What makes this conflict more bittersweet is Steve's genuine admiration for Robin's talent. The issue was never respect, but incompatible methods. A colleague said Steve never saw Williams as malicious. Still, in Martin's tightly built comic world, Robin's wildness felt like creative sabotage, no matter how brilliant the outcome. This philosophical divide led Steve to quietly avoid future collaborations. Insiders claim he turned down several projects with Robin, convinced their styles could not mesh. "It's like blending architecture with jazz," said a director who had worked with both. "Each is valid, each requires mastery, but they operate under different rules. Steve crafted jokes like an architect draws plans. Robin spun them like a jazz musician riffing on sax, following sparks of inspiration. That collision of approaches ensured that two great talents never fully joined forces. 6. Goldie Hawn, the schedule breaker. Tension between Martin and Hawn reportedly surfaced during the filming of House Sitter in 1992. A seemingly simple romantic comedy became a case of clashing work ethics and performance styles. Crew members said Goldie habits contrasted sharply with Martin's discipline and punctuality. She was often late to set, disrupting the schedule and slowing production. Steve was almost obsessively on time, explained a crew assistant. He treated punctuality as respect for the whole team. When Goldie made everyone wait, it frustrated him on a deeper level than just efficiency. The friction extended beyond timekeeping into performance itself. Sources say Hawn often improvised lines, catching Martin off guard and breaking the rhythm he had carefully rehearsed. Steve viewed dialogue like a musical score to be played faithfully. A director noted that Goldie, in contrast, preferred loose improvisation. She shifted lines mid-scene, forcing Steve to constantly adapt. The most personal sting came when Hawn reportedly mocked Steve's banjo playing, a passion central to his identity. The banjo isn't just a pastime for Steve, it's an art form he's devoted thousands of hours to, said a colleague. Having it belittled cut close to his core. While they stayed cordial during filming and promotion, insiders say Steve later refused every chance to work with her again. Martin allegedly described Goldie as a performer who masked ego behind charm, shared a producer familiar with both. He felt her playful persona allowed her to avoid accountability for behavior others couldn't get away with. The experience deepened Steve's resolve to work only with colleagues who respected preparation and collaboration. House Sitter remains an example of how two stars can deliver a film audiences enjoy, yet privately struggle so much that their partnership ends there. What looks effortless on television usually masks messy relationships off camera. Some men grow their hair long just to sweep it dramatically to one side. With that style, you can shape it into a pompadour or similar looks. My hair never grows long enough for that effect. Number 7. Charles Grodin. The deadpan clash. Reports suggest the friction between Steve Martin and Charles Grodin wasn't due to direct encounters, but rather Martin's reaction to Grodin's infamous Tonight Show antics. Witnesses recall Grodin leaning heavily on his trademark hostile persona, curt, dismissive, and purposely uncooperative. Though audiences recognized it as his act, Martin was unsettled by the very real discomfort it created on set. One Tonight Show staffer remembered Steve backstage, watching the monitor as Grodin turned his interview with Carson into a wall of awkwardness. What television viewers may have laughed at, Martin interpreted differently. He saw Johnny struggling to keep the flow alive while Grodin intentionally threw the rhythm off balance. Insiders note Steve was especially troubled by the toll it took on Carson, whom he deeply admired. Afterwards, Steve reportedly told a producer that it was painful to see Johnny undermined just to serve Grodin's bit. In Martin's view, Carson was being turned into an unwilling partner in a joke he hadn't signed up for. The issue for Martin wasn't the deadpan routine itself, but the genuine discomfort it forced on unsuspecting others. A writer who worked with Steve explained that he preferred comedy to be either openly fictional or mutually agreed upon, not performed at someone else's expense. From Martin's perspective, Grodin's Tonight Show appearance was less comedy than calculated awkwardness. A producer recalled Steve saying Grodin's commitment to the gag left behind genuine resentment rather than laughter. For a performer who champions collaboration, that style was unacceptable. Though Martin and Grodin rarely interacted professionally, the moment reinforced Steve's commitment to comedy free of unwilling victims. Steve's objection wasn't to the dry persona, clarified a director who worked with him. It was the way Grodin used it to make others visibly uncomfortable, which Steve considered crossing from humor into cruelty. "Marty, hand me a phone book so I can look him in the eye." Number 8. Don Rickles. The roast that burned too hot. The alleged conflict between Martin and insult comic Don Rickles came during a roast in the 1980s, when Rickles' jabs strayed into Martin's personal life. Guests recalled jokes about his divorce and finances, remarks that felt sharper than the playful digs expected at such events. Rickles was doing what he always did, insulting everyone in sight, said one attendee. But when it came to Steve, the personal barbs landed with a sting that seemed out of place. Though Martin smiled through it, friends later said the experience stuck with him as a lesson about cruelty in comedy.
A longtime colleague noted Steve believed there were limits, even at a roast. He felt Rickles had intentionally aimed for sensitive wounds instead of sticking to the usual surface-level material. Industry sources say Martin never attacked Rickles publicly, but quietly declined future joint appearances. What stung Steve wasn't being mocked. He was fine with that, said a producer who knew him. It was the sense that Rickles had gone for the most painful targets rather than the harmless ones roasts are built on. This episode reportedly sharpened Martin's belief that comedy should stem from empathy, not exploitation. A writer recalled Steve remarking that in Rickles' case, cruelty itself became the joke. Martin still respected Rickles' stature, but disagreed with a style that could leave real scars. The contrast highlights how subjective comedy can be. Some call it genius, others see it as unnecessarily harsh. Steve wasn't saying Rickles shouldn't perform, clarified a colleague. He was just drawing his personal line about humor that inflicts real harm. In Martin's philosophy, comedy works best when it unites people around shared absurdities. Humor that leans on genuine pain, even wrapped in tradition, in his mind, misuses the art form entirely. Wouldn't the record company be shocked if I bought that? You'd think it was impossible. Number 9. Burt Reynolds, The Prank War Problem. The tension between Steve Martin and Burt Reynolds reportedly came from Reynolds'
and
love
other
of
physical
elaborate
gags
pranks
that created chaos
often
on set.